Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Inshallah,
please.
Continuing and concluding our series titled The Characteristics of the Pious. And the series of characteristics, or the categories of characteristics that we're going to be covering today, are characteristics related to outlook on life. How the pious used to view life and how they used to behave in terms of their outlook on life. The first one that we will be discussing is the characteristic of gratitude, being grateful. This was a characteristic that was universal amongst the pious. All of the muttaqeen, they had this characteristic of being from the grateful, no matter what situation they were in. And what is it to be grateful? It is to understand the blessings of Allah and to ponder over them. And to be grateful for every blessing. To thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for every blessing that one can. Because in actuality, in reality, one cannot be grateful for every single blessing from Allah. It is absolutely impossible. It is impossible. And that is His mercy and His favor upon us, that we can't even begin to count all the blessings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals in the Quran, He says, and this is the translation, and remember when your Lord proclaimed, if you are grateful, I will surely increase you in favor. But if you deny, indeed, my punishment is severe. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling His slaves that if you are amongst the grateful, those who give thanks to Him in the proper way, through obedience, from the tongue, from the heart, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will increase His favor upon that slave. And if one were to be ungrateful and reject the favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then his punishment would be incurred upon that individual. And we have an example of a couple of the Sahaba and their example of gratefulness. This is a time when the Muslims were being persecuted and the Hijrah had already been made. And a couple of the Sahaba, a couple of the companions of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, they were running away from the kuffar of Makkah. They were running away for their lives. And they had to run away in a way that they barely had anything with them. They make their way to the sea, and their situation is that they only have the clothes on their backs. And they're running away for their lives. If they get caught, they will be killed. And the only item that they have on them is an old, moldy piece of bread. And it is so old that it has become hardened. This piece of bread is like a rock. And they sit by the seashore as the foam of the sea comes to them. And they dip this piece of bread into the water to make it a little bit soggy, to make it a little bit easier to eat. And they break this bread, and they break it praising their Lord, thanking their Lord, and smiling at one another, laughing and happy, and grateful for this favor, this piece of bread that they have with them, and grateful for the iman in their hearts. And they say to each other, if the Roman emperor or the Persian emperor could see us in this moment, if they could see how happy we are, they would want to kill us out of jealousy. Meaning, how is it that we are the kings of the world? We have the riches, we have the women, we have the land, we have everything that a man could want from a dunya sense. Yet these two men who have nothing, and they are breaking a piece of moldy bread, they are smiling and laughing at each other and have pure happiness and gratefulness to their Lord. This was the mentality of the Sahaba. This was the mentality of the muttaqeen, that regardless of their situation, they were in a state of gratitude. They were in a state of thanking their Lord, no matter what their situation was. And this next characteristic is related to this. It is the characteristic of patience. Patience. which is to bear through the tests and trials that might come through life without complaint, without losing iman, and still thanking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this situation whenever trials and tribulations come, and having hope that despite this trial, despite this difficult time, I know my Lord will give me something better. I know His reward will be for me if I am patient through this time. So this characteristic of patience, this was also universal amongst the muttaqeen, universal amongst the pious. And what better example do we have than the example of Prophet Ayyub alayhi salam? We know his story. He was a prophet who was given riches. He was given beauty. He was given children. He was given wives. He was given land, animals. Everything that a man could want, he received it in a halal way. And he earned it and he enjoyed it in a halal way. But one day Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to test him and to set an example for mankind of what a patient slave looks like, He took everything away from him. Everything. And he got inflicted with a severe skin disease. To the point that it is described that sometimes there would be insects and disgusting creatures on his skin. This is the type of infliction that he had. And even in this situation, when he lost everything that he had, he did not stop thanking his Lord. And he never lost patience. And he bore through that no matter what. And his wife, the only wife that remained with him, she asked him, "You are a prophet of Allah. Why do you not ask Allah to relieve you of this?" And look at his response. He said, "The amount of years of leisure and comfort that I've been given, I feel ashamed. I feel ashamed that I do not at least spend an equal amount of time in this suffering." This was the level of patience he had. And finally, when he saw the struggle of his wife got too severe, seeing her struggle, he finally made the dua to release this infliction. He asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And how did he ask? He asked in the best way possible. He mentioned to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, "Oh Allah, I have been touched. All this difficulty, this severe disease that he spent with for years and years and years." And he mentions it as just being touched, just touched by difficulty. Meanwhile, when we go through the smallest inconvenience, we think the world is over. We think that everything is over and we can't get through this, and we lose hope. But this is not from the characteristics of the pious. From the characteristics of the pious is to be patient and to have hope that no matter what happens, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will help us in the end, if we have faith, if we continue to submit to Him and continue to thank Him. So the lessons that we must learn from these two characteristics of gratitude and patience: constantly ponder over the blessings that we have. Look to those who have less than us. Look to those who are less fortunate than us. Think about this example. Would any of us, if we were offered $1 billion on the condition that we lose our eyesight forever, for the rest of our lives, none of us would take this. None of us would take this. Yet our Lord gave us these eyes for free from birth. Those of us who can see. It is a blessing that we cannot even begin to thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for. And in terms of afflictions and trials, all we have to do is look at our brothers and sisters in Gaza, our brothers and sisters in Kashmir, our brothers and sisters in East Turkestan, in China. All we have to do is look at their afflictions and remember that our problems are nothing compared to what they are going through. Now the next characteristic, again, this is universal amongst all the muttaqeen. It is of humility, humbleness. What is humility and what is humbleness? It is to not have any arrogance, to not think of oneself as great, and to know that everything good that we have is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we are dependent on Allah for everything. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "The servants of the most merciful are those who walk upon the earth in humility. And when the ignorant address them, they say words of peace." And we have an example of a very humble Sahabi, to the point that many of us might not have even heard of his name. And this is the example of Sa'id ibn Zayd. One time he was in the masjid in Kufa, and he spoke up to defend the honor of the Sahaba. And he said, I swear by Allah, I heard these words from the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is the hadith of the 10 promised paradise. He says, Abu Bakr is in Jannah, Umar is in Jannah, Uthman is in Jannah, Ali is in Jannah, Talha is in Jannah, Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas is in Jannah, Abdul Rahman ibn Auf is in Jannah, Al-Zubayr is in Jannah, Abu Ubaidah is in Jannah. And if I wanted, I could name the 10th as well. And the people say, they said to him, Oh Sa'id, tell us who is the 10th? And they kept on asking him, tell us who is the 10th? And he looks down in humility, and he says, the 10th is me. I am the 10th, guaranteed Jannah. Look at his humbleness. He did not even want to mention this. He did not even want to mention that I am one of the 10 who are guaranteed Jannah. What a great honor. No matter if he said it or not, he was guaranteed. But his humbleness, he did not think of himself as great. He was someone who lived a private life. He was someone who did not partake in politics. And in fact, his father were one of the ones before prophethood who was a monotheist. So he had this honor as well, that his father was the ones who had already given off shirk before the prophethood of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yet he lived humbly, he lived with humility, and he never praised himself. This was the characteristics of the pious, of the muttaqeen. They did not like praise for themselves. They did not think of themselves as great. And they knew everything in their life that they had good was from their Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in this is a lesson for us, that we continue to do as much as we can and always check ourselves whenever we are doing some good. Always make sure that we are doing this good with pure sincerity. We are doing it for the sake of Allah, and we are ensuring that we are not doing this for our own self-praise. We are not doing this to boast ourselves. We are not doing this to make ourselves seem better than others. And now the next characteristic, and it is the characteristic of zuhud. And what is zuhud? It is to not be a slave of the dunya. It is prioritizing the hereafter. And it is using the dunya as a means to succeed in the akhirah, and not loving the dunya. This is what it means to be a zahid. The Messenger ﷺ said, verily it is enough for you to have in the world the likes of a traveler's provision. So meaning, he is giving us the advice that from the pious, their traits are that when they are in this world, it is as if they are travelers. Whenever one travels somewhere, does he pack all his belongings? Does he pack everything he owns? Does he pack everything that he could possibly bring? No. He packs just what he needs. Just what he thinks is going to help him on this journey. He brings that with him, and he uses that in that journey. So this is the analogy. The ones who have zuhud, they are the ones who only use enough that they need in this dunya. And they use it as a means to achieve greatness in the akhirah. And we have the example of Abu Dharr radiallahu ta'ala. He was one of the foremost examples of what a zahid was. He took the verses of giving to the poor, and the verses of zakat, and the verses of sadaqah so deeply to heart that it was his way of life, that whenever he would earn money in a day, he would set aside the money for himself and his family, what they need in that day, just that day. And whatever was left over, after buying food, after buying provisions, after buying what they needed, he would give all of his earnings away in sadaqah. He would give all of it away. And he would have a complete detachment from the dunya. And it is his example that the Prophet ﷺ said that Abu Dharr walks alone, he will die alone, and he will be resurrected and enter paradise alone. One time this example was given when he was left behind from an army, and the Sahaba saw him walking from a distance. And that is when the revelation came. And that exact prophecy came true. That was how the death of Abu Dhar was as well. It was a time of difficulty. And he was traveling with his family, and along the way, he got a premonition and he understood that my time of death is near. So he tells his family, leave me on the side of the road. I know that some brothers of mine will come and they will do the janazah prayer over me and they will bury me. And so he was left in that condition with owning nothing. And then Ibn Masud radiallahu ta'ala anhu found him in that condition, lying, passed away on the side of the road, with nothing, owning nothing. And the janazah prayer was prayed upon him, and he was buried in that state. This was the example of many of the Sahaba. Many of the Sahaba, they had a detachment from the dunya. And now we must understand one thing from the lesson that we learned. It is possible for a rich man to be a zahid. And it is possible also for a poor man to not be a zahid. This is true. Somebody who has the dunya, for example, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, and Abdul Rahman ibn Auf, and Uthman radiallahu ta'ala, all of them had zuhd. They had wealth, but at the same time they were amongst the zahid. They were zahid because they did not have an attachment to the dunya. They used to use their wealth as a means to do good. They used to use their wealth as a means to support this religion. They used to use their wealth as a means to purify themselves. Yet at the same time, a poor man, he could have greed of the dunya. He could have a want for the dunya. He craves the dunya. He wished he could be rich. He wished he could do this and spend lavishly. So it is possible, again, to have nice things, to be rich, to provide for your family, and still be a man of zuhd. So my brothers, these are some of the examples of the characteristics that are related to the outlook on life. Again, these are gratitude, patience, humility, and zuhd. And we conclude this series understanding the fact that all these are just some of the characteristics of the pious. And we go through these characteristics to learn how we can become pious, how we can walk on that path, how we can follow their example. Because understand one thing, these men that we have mentioned, every one of them were born with the same free will that we were born with. They were born with the same chances and opportunities that we were born with. They were born the same flesh and blood that we were born as. They were human beings just like us. They were not angels. They used to get tired. They used to feel pain. They used to have wants and desires. Yet they were these people of piety. They were slaves of Allah. And they were from the muttaqeen. And these characteristics, these are the characteristics that they lived by. And that is what led them to reach that level of being from the pious, of being from the muttaqeen. So if we want to succeed, if we want to finish our lives and be close to that category of the pious, of the muttaqeen, then we must study their lives, and not just study their lives as stories and fairy tales and legends, but study them knowing that these are the best role models that we can ever look at. And study them knowing that, yes, we might not reach their level. We can't be as good as the Sahaba. We can't be as good as the Tabi'in. We can't be as good as the third generation of Muslims. We can't. We know this. But we can come close. We can come close, and on the day of judgment, when they are standing right behind the Messenger ﷺ, at least we can strive to be close by. We know we won't be right there next to him, but we can strive to be close by. And even the proximity to them, it will be our success. So it is upon us to take these lessons, to learn these characteristics, and try to emulate them in our lives as much as possible, and be an example for our own families, be an example for our friends, be an example for our communities, and prove that these characteristics are not just characteristics of legends and characteristics of angels, but they are characteristics of human beings who are flawed, human beings who make mistakes. We can make mistakes and still have these characteristics. So it is upon us to strive in this path and do the best that we can so that we may be successful in this life and the hereafter. All praise and glory is due to Allah, and may His peace and blessing be on the Prophet ﷺ. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive us and guide us, and to help us in instilling these characteristics within us, and to help us in reaching the peak of our iman, and to help us in succeeding in this life and the hereafter. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.